Hi everyone, I am going to go over some of my personal go-to hip flexor stretches as well as some additional ones and other lower body stretches in just a moment. First, I want to talk a bit about hip flexors and imbalances in our body because the stretches I'm about to show you are not a one size fits all. They don't apply to everyone. Like nothing in fitness applies to everyone. That's why I really always want to encourage you to learn your body and what works best for you. So these stretches I'm going to show you, as I mentioned, will only apply to certain people depending on what is wrong with your hip flexors. So what you need to determine if you have weak hip flexors, shortened hip flexors, tight hip flexors, that is going to depend on a lot of things. A lot of hip flexor problems are caused by postural problems, by weaknesses and imbalances in the body. So we're gonna go over a bit of that. But the reason why your hip flexor health and hip mobility is so important, first of all, is because it's, as I mentioned, it's linked to a lot of imbalances in your body, and it's also directly linked to the inability to actively engage your certain muscle groups like your glutes or your abs, and that's not what we want. You know, we're working so hard in the gym, we want to be able to get everything out of our workouts that we possibly can, and we don't want something like hip flexor problems to be hindering that hard work. So what I want you to do is to think about your posture. You know, who sits perfectly like this? I don't know anyone. We all have something, you know, of our posture that we can improve, whether it's, you know, putting our shoulders back, not rounding them over. You know, me personally, if I round my shoulders over, I round my lower back over, and I tilt my pelvis in, and that is called a posterior pelvic tilt. Some other girls actually have a anterior pelvic tilt, which is the most common, and that's where their bottom kind of sticks out a bit, and that tightens the hip flexors. So that's where foam rolling is going to be really great for, to lengthen those hip flexors back out. So, you know, once you assess your posture and exactly what is wrong with your hip flexors, then you can take from the stretches that I show you and apply them to your case. And honestly, this is really just kind of the surface of hip flexors. There's still so much more detail and information I can and want to give you. I'm gonna start with this video and see what questions you have, and then we can dive a little bit deeper into the topic of hip flexors. There really is so much to cover, and like I said, it's not a one size fits all. So I would love to do a video specific to the posterior pelvic tilt, which is the problem I have, and another one specific to the anterior pelvic tilt, which is the most common one. So I hope you enjoy the exercises, and I will ask for your questions and comments at the end. So first, I'm going to start with foam rolling. Anytime you do any activity or even any stretching, you want to foam roll first. So I'm going to lay on my hips and try to find exactly where I feel the most tenderness on my hip flexors. Everyone is different, so it might be in a slightly different part of your hips than someone else. And then you want to foam roll on the outside of your thighs, which is your IT band. Everything is connected, so if you're experiencing tightness in one part of your lower body, it's likely connected to your hamstrings or your quads, you know, IT band, etc. So you really want to be sure to foam roll all the surrounding areas. Even something like knee pain can be caused from a tight IT band or tightness in a muscle group. So you really want to be sure to actively foam roll your lower body on a regular basis. Here I'm foam rolling my upper glutes. It's a small muscle group just like the hip flexors, so you don't have to move very much. You just find where you feel the most tension and foam roll for about 10 to 15 seconds. Now we're moving on to the back, and something really important to know is that you do not want to foam roll your lower back. We don't have the muscular support and structure to protect our spine from that pressure, so you don't want to foam roll your lower back. If you are experiencing lower back pain, as I mentioned earlier, everything is connected. It is likely a result from something in your lower body or even your upper body that is imbalanced or has excessive tension that needs to be released, and that will help your lower back. Now we're going to move on to some of my go-to stretches for opening up the hips. This one is the seated glute stretch, so you're just going to sit with your ankle across the opposite knee. And you can sit here for a moment to assess exactly how tight your hips are. You can go back onto your forearms. And then I'm going to begin to sway my hips back and forth. Really lightly. You never want to force it beyond what you feel your body can do. Just slowly let it fall as far as it can go on each side. Then I'm going to switch sides and just focusing on opening up the hips and feeling that tension release. A lot of times we have problems either internally rotating our hips or externally rotating our hips, and this is usually connected to posture and also from sitting all day at work, which I'm sure a lot of us do. Now I'm going to move on to a hamstring stretch. So you can just tuck in one leg. You can also have both legs out if you would like. And I'm going to bend over my head down to my knee, get a little bit of a lower back stretch as well. And now this is one of the stretches that really started to help improve my hip flexors by internally rotating my hips. So I'm also externally rotating just to show you both options. However, for me personally, I need to work on internally rotating more than anything. So it's not necessarily bringing your toe down. You actually want to focus this movement occurring at the hips, not at the toes, and definitely not at the knees. If you do have knee problems, you actually probably want to avoid this move, or just be sure that your toe is pointed to protect your knee from moving too much. But like I said, definitely focus on this rotation occurring at the hips. It's kind of hard to do, so I'm holding my knee down a little bit just to be sure that, I'm focusing on the hips, not the knees and not the toes. Next, we're going to move into the 90-90 stretch. So my left leg is tucked, then you just move your right leg back behind you. And this might feel a little weird, so if your body starts to cramp up, just remember that is a result of your muscles saying, hey, my body isn't supposed to be contorting this way, I need to protect it. Just try to relax as much as you can to allow your hips to open up. So if it feels a little bit weird, that's totally okay. Just try to relax, and then of course don't stay in this position for too long if it gets to be too uncomfortable, but it is something that you want to try to work up towards to be able to stay in this position even longer. So as with any stretch and any hip flexor move, this isn't a one-size-fits-all. So whether any of these moves are going to be right for you really depends on your particular case. And the reason I want to point that out is because I want to let you know this move right here, when you're in the 90-90 stretch position, you just raise that back leg. This really helped me towards the beginning of my hip flexor rehabilitation, but now it doesn't really have that same effect because I've gotten to a stage where I've opened them up so much, so this is no longer necessary for me to do. So if you want to go ahead and try it and see if it helps improve your hips, if it helps them feel more open or release tension, that's great. If it doesn't, that's totally okay. You just need to find a different hip flexor stretch and move that will help. And on this one, I'm just showing you that you can also move back a bit and stretch the hip flexors. It's a nice torso stretch as well. And then just on the opposite side. And again, you don't want to, push it too far to where you might feel pain, just to the point where you feel a bit of tension releasing. And now here I'm going to move into a butterfly stretch. Stretches your inner thighs, which is your adductors. So you can just sit for a minute, try to let your knees fall to the ground. Don't push it too much. Just, slowly as you do this stretch, you will be able to, have an improved range of that flexibility. And now I'm doing just a lower back stretch, a bit of a hamstring stretch as well. And then I'm going to move into a frog stretch. So this is another one that really helps open up the hips. Might look a little funny, but one thing that you can do if you're having a lot of trouble with this, if you can't even lay down on the ground in this position, that's okay. You're going to improve as you incorporate this into your regular routine, but you can also have someone behind you holding your feet and pushing them up towards your bottom to help improve that range of motion. Now we're going to do a standing glute stretch. So this is really similar to the seated glute stretch. It stretches pretty much about the same part of your hip flexors and your hips and your glutes even. I really, really love this stretch. You want to be sure that you're holding on to something stable and that you are just, twisting a little bit side to side to open up your hips and to deepen that stretch. Now we're going to a kneeling hip flexor stretch. To be honest, this is not really a stretch that I need to be doing, but it is a really common hip flexor stretch that could help you.
Now we're going to a standing quad hip flexor stretch. So there's two different ways you can do this. You can have it be just the quad, but I bent over a little bit at the end to get that extra hip flexor stretch. So you can give it a try and see if you feel some tension release in your hip flexors from that. Same thing here, a half hero stretch. If you cannot lay down on the ground right away, you can prop yourself up with your hands behind you, and this will help to stretch the hip flexors as well. And again, like I said, it really depends on exactly what your hip flexor problem is, whether this is going to be a suitable stretch for you. Here's a modification where I raise the opposite leg. You can raise it if it is too much of a stretch by laying down with both legs on the ground. And this is the last stretch, so it's a pigeon pose. And you just bring I have my left leg forward, and you want to try to stretch your glute, and that opens up your hips. And over time, you'll want to try to get as low to the ground as possible. You can see I am not that low, so this is one stretch that I need to work on and work into my regular stretching routine.
So those were my go-to stretches, plus quite a few more. So I want you to try those and to see which ones give you the most relief. Like I said, they're not all gonna be right for every single person. It really depends on your specific case. I am gonna put a link below to a video that I found really helpful. Like I said, this video is just really covering the surface, and this video that I'm gonna link goes into even more detail about having an anterior pelvic tilt or posterior pelvic tilt and how you can assess that for yourself. I hope you liked the video. If you have any questions, write them below, and I will base my next video off of those questions. So thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time. When you lose fat from your overall body, including from your breast. And first, what are macros? Also referred to as flexible dieting.